At an altitude of 40,000 feet, catastrophe struck when the two pilots fell into a sudden, deep unconsciousness, leaving 153 souls aboard facing an inescapable fate. But in that moment of despair, an unlikely hero emerged, 7-year-old Lily Anderson. With no real-world experience beyond sophisticated flight simulators, she took command of the colossal Boeing 737. The events that followed sent shockwaves through the global aviation community and irrevocably altered the course of her young life. The morning light cast a warm glow across the sky as 7-year-old Lily Anderson navigated the bustling airport terminal, her face radiating pure joy. She held a treasured book on aviation tightly in one hand while her other pulled a small suitcase adorned with a collection of airplane stickers. Her father, Mac, walked beside her, a look of immense pride on his face as he watched his daughter, who seemed to shine with happiness. This was no ordinary journey. For months, Lily had eagerly awaited this very day, her first flight, a trip to see her grandmother in Miami. She had diligently filled her piggy bank, tackling extra household tasks and even parting with beloved toys to help pay for her own ticket. For Lily, aviation was more than a simple interest. It was an all-consuming passion, her entire world. "Daddy, look, a Boeing 747. Lily exclaimed, pointing through the expansive windows at the tarmac. "See how the engines are mounted way out on the wings. That's what gives it so much lift for all the people inside." Mark beamed. "You continue to astonish me, sweetheart. You know more about these aircraft than most grown-ups." As they neared their gate, Lily's excitement intensified. She examined every feature of their plane, a Boeing 737-800, a model whose specifications she knew by heart, a top speed of 588 miles per hour, a cruising altitude of 40,000 feet, and a travel range exceeding 3,000 miles. To her, these were not just figures, they were the embodiment of the flying marvel that had captured her spirit since she was just a toddler. Once on board, Lily could barely contain herself in her seat. She had carefully selected a spot by the window to get a perfect view of the takeoff. While other travelers got settled, she pressed her face against the cool glass, meticulously watching the ground crew ready the jet for its journey. "Excuse me, sweetie," a gentle voice said. Lily looked up to see a flight attendant with a kind expression and a welcoming smile. "I couldn't help but notice how focused you are on everything. Are you a big fan of airplanes?" Lily's usual shyness vanished when the conversation turned to flying. "Yes, I'm going to be a pilot. My dad helps me study the books, and I've been on his flight simulator since I was 4. I can read the important dials and I know what the autopilot does." The flight attendant, whose name tag read Claire, looked genuinely impressed. "That's amazing. I'm certain Captain Evans would be delighted to meet you once we are in the air. Perhaps we can arrange for a quick look inside the cockpit." Lily's eyes widened with delight. "Really? That would be the best thing ever." As the plane pushed back from the terminal, Lily described each phase of the procedure to her father. "They are starting the engines now. Isn't that a great sound? The pilots are going through their checklists, making sure all the systems are ready for our trip." The aircraft taxied toward the runway, and Lily felt a familiar flutter of anticipation. She had replayed this scene in her mind countless times, but the reality surpassed her wildest dreams. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Evans from the flight deck. We are cleared for takeoff and are anticipating a very smooth ride to Miami today. Our flight will last about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey." Lily squeezed her father's hand as the powerful engines roared, and the aircraft surged down the runway. The moment of liftoff was pure magic, that breathtaking feeling of defying gravity and climbing into the heavens. She watched as the world below shrank, buildings and vehicles turning into tiny specks on a vast map. "We're flying, Daddy. We're really, truly flying," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Once the jet reached its cruising altitude, the flight settled into a calm rhythm. True to her word, Claire the flight attendant returned to Lily's row. "Would you like to come meet the pilots? They have a few free moments right now." Lily nearly leaped from her seat. "Yes, please." The visit to the cockpit was everything she had imagined. Captain Evans and First Officer Grant were impressed by her depth of knowledge and boundless enthusiasm. She posed insightful questions about the flight management computer, the autopilot configurations, and the weather patterns on the radar screen. "You certainly know your aviation, Lily," Captain Evans remarked with a note of admiration. "Keep up that passion, and I have no doubt we'll be colleagues one day." Returning to her seat, Lily couldn't wipe the smile from her face. She spent the following hour sketching the cockpit's instrument panel in her notepad, documenting every detail she had witnessed. The flight was proceeding flawlessly, with clear skies and calm air. But then, roughly midway to their destination, something felt different. It began as a faint change in the engine's pitch, a sound so subtle that most passengers wouldn't have noticed. Lily's attuned ears, however, caught it instantly. The constant drone had developed a slight irregularity, like a misfiring cylinder in a car. She frowned, leaning closer to the cabin wall. "Daddy, do you hear that?" she whispered. Mark paused to listen but shook his head. "Hear what, sweetheart?" Before she could elaborate, the plane experienced a minor jolt. It was nothing alarming, just a brief tremor that could have been mistaken for light turbulence. Yet, paired with the altered engine noise, it put Lily on edge. Then, an announcement came from the cockpit. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are dealing with some small technical difficulties. There is no cause for alarm, but we might need to adjust our course slightly. We ask that you please remain seated with your seat belts secured." Lily's heart began to beat faster. She understood from her extensive reading on aviation incidents that phrases like small technical difficulties were often used to downplay more significant problems. The aircraft started a slow descent, so gradual that it went unnoticed by most on board. But Lily, tracking the horizon through her window, could see the definite change in altitude. What troubled her more was the prolonged silence from the flight deck. "Something is wrong," she said quietly to her father. "The pilots are supposed to keep passengers updated during any issue. This silence is not right." Mark tried to calm her. "I'm sure it's nothing to worry about, Lily. The crew is trained for this." But Lily's sense of foreboding deepened when she saw Claire and the other flight attendants conferring in hushed, worried tones near the front galley. Their professional smiles had vanished, replaced by looks of deep concern. Suddenly, a passenger seated near the front of the aircraft cried out, "Something's happened to the pilots. They're not moving." The words sent a wave of cold fear through the cabin. Claire rushed to the cockpit door, another crew member close behind. Through the briefly opened door, Lily saw a sight that confirmed her deepest anxieties. Both pilots were slumped lifelessly in their chairs, completely unresponsive. Panic started to spread as the gravity of their predicament dawned on everyone. The plane was being flown by its autopilot, but these systems are not equipped to manage emergencies or perform complex maneuvers. Without conscious pilots, the aircraft was a massive, sophisticated machine hurtling blindly through the sky. Lily's mind raced, recalling everything she had absorbed from years of dedicated study. She knew modern jets were incredibly safe and that the autopilot could maintain altitude and heading for a long time. However, she also knew it couldn't react to unforeseen events, communicate with air traffic control, or land the plane. Acting on pure instinct, she unfastened her seat belt and stood up. "Lily, get back in your seat," her father pleaded, but she was already making her way forward. "Claire," she called out to the flight attendant. "I know about planes. I think I can help." The attendant turned, her eyes filled with desperation. "Lily, this is extremely serious. The pilots are both unconscious, and we can't rouse them. We've asked for any doctors on board." "But the plane," Lily persisted. "Someone has to fly the plane. The autopilot might fail, and even if it doesn't, it can't get us on the ground safely." Claire looked at the small girl, a flicker of hope mixing with her disbelief. "Lily, you're only a child. This isn't a simulator." "I know," Lily replied with resolve. "But I also know that if no one takes over, we will all crash. I have studied the systems for this exact airplane. I know the basic controls. I can't do everything a real pilot can, but I can try to talk to air traffic control and do what they say." The weight of the crisis descended on the cabin. Passengers were beginning to grasp the situation, and fear was spreading rapidly. Some were sobbing, others were praying, and a few were becoming frantic. Claire made a decision that would alter history. "All right, Lily. If you truly believe you can help, we have to try. I will be right next to you." As they neared the cockpit, Lily's heart pounded violently. This was no longer a game. More than 150 lives were now resting on her knowledge and courage. The cockpit was a bewildering array of blinking lights and blaring alarms. The pilots were breathing but remained unresponsive. The autopilot was holding the plane steady, but Lily spotted several warning indicators that signaled escalating problems. Taking a deep breath, she clambered into the co-pilot's seat. The controls felt heavier and more solid than in her simulator, more real. But the layout was familiar. Every switch, dial, and display was precisely where she had learned it would be. "First," she announced, her voice surprisingly firm, "we have to call air traffic control. They have to know what is happening. She reached for the radio, dialing in the emergency frequency she had memoized, 121.5 megahertz. Her hands trembled as she keyed the microphone. Mayday, 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 she broadcasted. This is Flight 447. We have an emergency. Both pilots are unconscious. I am a 7-year-old passenger attempting to fly the aircraft. We require immediate help. The reply was almost instantaneous. Flight 447, this is Miami Center. We read your mayday. Please confirm your position and current situation. Lily glanced at the navigation screen and relayed their coordinates. We are at flight level 400, about 200 miles northeast of Miami. Autopilot is engaged and holding us level, but I see multiple warning lights. I have some simulator knowledge of the systems, but I'm going to need a lot of guidance. We copy, Flight 447. You are being incredibly brave. We are going to help you through this. First, what is your name? Lily Anderson. I'm 7 years old. I've been studying planes for years. I know the basics of this Boeing 737, but I've never flown for real. Okay, Lily, my name is Controller Miller, and I will be your voice on the ground. We are gathering a team of specialists to walk you through this. You have done an amazing job so far. Can you describe the warning lights you are seeing? Lily scanned the instrument panel. I see a yellow light for the hydraulic system, a fuel imbalance alert, and one that says cabin pressure warning. The autopilot is still on, but I don't know for how long. Those are all issues we can manage, Lily. We will address them one by one. Let's start with the cabin pressure. Find a switch labeled manual pressurization, over on your right. Lily located the switch and followed the instruction. The warning light extinguished, giving her a small surge of confidence. Excellent work. Now, for the fuel imbalance. We will need to move fuel from one tank to another to keep the plane stable. But before that, I need you to understand something critical. You do not need to be perfect. You just need to listen to our instructions very carefully, and we will bring you and everyone on that plane down safely. For the next half hour, Controller Miller and his team guided Lily through a complex sequence of procedures to stabilize the aircraft's systems. With each successful step, her confidence grew, though she remained acutely aware of the immense burden on her small shoulders. The most critical test came when the autopilot began to fail. Alarms shrieked through the cockpit as the plane started to roll to the left. Lily, the autopilot is malfunctioning. You will need to take manual control of the aircraft. Are you ready? Her heart hammering, Lily put her hands on the control yoke. I'm ready. Gently disengage the autopilot with the button on the yoke. Then, use very small movements to bring the wings level. Remember, smooth and gentle. Lily pressed the autopilot disconnect button, and in an instant, she was flying a massive commercial jetliner at 40,000 feet. The responsibility was immense, but her hours of practice took over. She made tiny, careful adjustments, and gradually, the aircraft stabilized into level flight. Outstanding, Lily. You are now flying the airplane. How does it feel? Scary and amazing, she confessed. For the next hour, Lily flew the plane by hand as Controller Miller and his team coordinated the most difficult part of the ordeal, the landing. They rerouted the flight to Miami International Airport, where emergency services were on standby. As they started their descent, her father appeared at the cockpit door. His face was etched with worry, but his eyes were filled with pride. Lily, you are doing something incredible. I am so proud of you. I'm scared, Daddy, she admitted. Landing is the hardest part, and I've only done it on the computer. You can do this, Lily. You've already accomplished the impossible. Just listen to the controller and trust what you've learned. The approach into Miami was the longest 20 minutes of Lily's life. Controller Miller coached her through every single step, configuring the plane for landing, lowering the flaps and landing gear, and maintaining the correct speed and rate of descent. Lily, your alignment with the runway is perfect. You are handling this better than many seasoned pilots would. Just hold your current descent and get ready for touchdown. The runway grew larger and larger in the windscreen. Lily's hands were steady on the controls, her gaze fixed on the approaching runway numbers. Remember, Lily, just let the plane settle onto the runway. Don't push it down. The main wheels kissed the pavement with a soft thud, followed seconds later by the nose wheel. Lily had done it. She had safely landed a commercial airliner. The cabin erupted in cheers and applause as the jet slowed to a stop. Emergency vehicles swarmed the plane, and paramedics boarded to care for the unconscious pilots. As Lily finally let go of the controls, Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Claire enveloped her in a massive hug, tears of relief streaming down both their faces. "You did it, Lily. You saved every single one of us." The story of the 7-year-old girl who landed a passenger jet traveled across the globe in a matter of hours. News crews flocked to the airport, and Lily was suddenly in a spotlight she had never sought. At the press conference, she spoke softly into the microphones. "I just did what I had to do. I couldn't let anything happen to my daddy and all those people. I love airplanes, and I guess all my studying finally helped." The airline awarded Lily and her family free flights for life, and aviation academies from all over the country invited her to visit their facilities. But the message that touched her most was a letter from Captain Evans and First Officer Grant, who had made a full recovery from their sudden medical crisis. "Dear Lily," it began, "thank you for saving our lives and the lives of everyone on board. You have shown that heroes can be any age and that knowledge, bravery, and focus can conquer any challenge. We hope one day to fly with you as our professional colleague." Months later, as Lily pursued her aviation education with renewed vigor, she often reflected on that day. It had transformed her life, not because of the attention, but because it had proven that her biggest dreams were possible. She knew with unwavering certainty that she was destined to become a pilot, and when that day arrived, she would be prepared for any trial the skies might present. The tale of Flight 447 became an aviation legend, the day a 7-year-old girl, driven by a love for flying, saved 153 lives through her incredible courage, knowledge, and an unyielding will to bring everyone home safely. In the weeks that followed, Lily's world changed entirely. The quiet, bookish child found herself the focus of global fascination. Television producers called constantly, aviation journals requested interviews, and thousands of letters arrived from all corners of the earth. One letter in particular moved her to tears. It was from an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, who had been a passenger that day. "Dear Lily," she wrote, "I am 78 years old, and I was on my way to Miami to meet my great-grandson for the very first time. Because of you, I was able to hold that little boy and tell him stories about his great-grandfather, who was a pilot in World War II. You didn't just save our lives, you saved all the precious moments we will now have with our families." The Federal Aviation Administration launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident. Their final report lauded Lily's actions and recommended incorporating her story into pilot training curricula as a powerful example of how theoretical knowledge and calm judgment can avert disaster in critical moments. 3 months later, Lily had a surprise visitor. Captain Olivia Reed, one of the youngest female airline captains in the nation, appeared at her door one Saturday. "Lily, I flew all the way here just to meet you," she said with a bright smile. "When I was your age, people told me girls couldn't be pilots. You've shown that not only can girls fly, but sometimes they are the ones who save the day when seasoned professionals can't." Captain Reed spent the day with Lily, patiently answering her endless questions about a career in aviation. Before she left, she made Lily a promise. "When you turn 16 and are ready for your flight training, you call me. I will personally see to it that you get the very best instructors. The world needs more pilots like you, people who understand that flying is both a science and an art." The airline industry celebrated Lily's story in unprecedented ways. Boeing, the maker of the plane she landed, invited her and her family to their Seattle headquarters. There, she was treated to a private tour of their assembly plant and was even invited into the cockpit of the newest 737 model. "In my 30 years of flying," the chief test pilot told her, "I have never witnessed anyone manage an emergency with such poise and brilliance. You possess an innate grasp of aircraft systems that most pilots take years to acquire." During the visit, Boeing announced the creation of the Lily Anderson Young Aviators Scholarship Fund, designed to provide financial aid to young people aspiring to careers in aviation, with a special emphasis on encouraging girls and underrepresented groups to join the field. Back at home, Lily's school was bursting with pride. The principal held a special assembly where Lily was invited to share her story with her fellow students. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, she felt a familiar nervous excitement. "I want you all to know something," she began, her voice clear. "I didn't save that plane because I was special. I saved it because I spent years learning about something I loved. Every book I read, every hour on the simulator, every question I asked, all of it prepared me for the one moment when that knowledge was what mattered most." She paused, her gaze sweeping across her classmates. "Find what you love, what makes you excited, and learn everything about it. You never know when your passion could save a life, change the world, or help you do something you never thought was possible." The applause was deafening, but what touched Lily most was seeing some of her friends wiping away tears. Afterward, a quiet boy named Leo approached her. "Lily, I've always wanted to be an engineer, but other kids tease me for liking math. After hearing you, I know I shouldn't care what they think. Can you tell me more about how you learned about airplane engines?" That conversation sparked an idea. Lily started an after-school club called the Future Aviators, where students could explore all facets of aviation, from piloting and design to air traffic control and aerospace engineering. Within a fortnight, 4 to 7 students had joined. As the first anniversary of the flight approached, Lily marveled at how profoundly her life had altered. She earned her student pilot license on her 16th birthday and had already flown her first solo flight. True to her word, Captain Reed had put her in touch with the region's best instructors. The local airport even dedicated a small exhibit to Flight 447, featuring the cockpit voice recordings, photos of the landing, and interactive displays demonstrating how Lily had controlled the aircraft. A year to the day after the incident, Lily stood once more at a gate in Miami International Airport. But this time, she was not an anxious passenger. She was a confident young aviator chasing her dream. Mark watched in awe as she discussed the flight plan with their pilot, identifying weather systems on the radar and asking intelligent questions about route optimization. "Captain Evans," Lily called out, recognizing the man approaching their gate. He was fully recovered and had been back in the cockpit for 6 months. "Lily, look at you. You're practically a pilot already," he said warmly. "I hear you're making waves in your flight training." "I have my private pilot check ride next month," she announced proudly. "And I've been accepted into a university aviation program. I should have my commercial license by the time I'm 20. Captain Evans nodded. "I have no doubt you'll be a superb airline pilot. In fact, the company has started a new fast-track program for exceptional young aviators, and they want you to be its first member." Lily's eyes grew wide. It was more than she had ever imagined. On this flight, she felt a different kind of thrill. It wasn't the wide-eyed wonder of a first-timer, but the deep satisfaction of someone who had found their calling. During the flight, the captain invited her to the cockpit, not as a hero, but as a peer. When she returned to her seat, Mark saw the absolute conviction in her eyes. "This is your world now, isn't it, sweetheart?" he asked. "Yes, Dad. This is where I belong. Up here, everything just makes sense." 2 years later, at 18, Lily earned her commercial pilot license, among the youngest in the state to do so. That same week, she received a call from Controller Miller, the man who had guided her to safety. "Lily, the FAA is designing a new emergency response curriculum, and they want you to help design it based on your experience." The program she helped create became a mandatory part of pilot training across the country, revolutionizing how aviators were taught to handle crises. On her 21st birthday, Lily earned her airline transport pilot license, the highest certification possible. That very day, she was hired by the same airline she had flown on as a child, becoming the youngest female captain in its history. Her first day of training was a surreal experience. She walked into the same facility where Captain Evans had learned to fly the 737. The irony was not lost on her. During her final evaluation flight, the examiner was none other than Captain Olivia Reed. After a flawless performance, Captain Reed turned to her eyes glistening. "Sophia, I've been flying for 15 years. I have never seen anyone with your level of skill, knowledge, and natural talent. You are ready to be an exceptional airline pilot." 6 months later, Captain Lily Anderson sat in the left-hand seat of a Boeing 737-800. She now wore the 4 gold stripes of a captain, responsible for the lives of 162 passengers and crew. As she ran through her pre-flight checklist, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Her first officer, a 20-year veteran, regarded her with pure respect. In the aviation world, her name was already a legend. "Captain Anderson," the voice from air traffic control crackled, "Flight 847 is cleared for takeoff." Lily pushed the throttles forward, feeling the familiar press of acceleration. As the jet lifted from the runway, she smiled. The frightened little girl who had once grabbed the controls out of desperation was now the confident captain guiding her own flight through the skies. And she knew that every challenge, every hour of study, and every moment of self-doubt had been worth it. Dreams, she knew, really do come true, often in ways more incredible than we could ever imagine.